Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jeff Deitch, CEO and co-founder of InfoWorks Data Services, and I'm here today with Gary Grubert and David Sellers to tell you a little bit about data migration. During the presentation, you can feel free to put questions into the question and answer box you'll see on your control panel. We will have a session at the end of the presentation to answer those and any others you come up with. 30 years ago, interoperability wasn't even a word. Today, it is the single highest priority in healthcare technology. InfoWorks has been helping define and provide interoperability since our inception. We deliver on this through our various products and services, all designed around our mission of ensuring patients have their data where they want it, when they need it. What is a data migration? Simply, it's transferring your data from one system to another. No matter what kind of provider you are, you have software systems that are running your practice. They're keeping track of your patients, the services you provide them, the results, and a lot of other data about them and your interactions. Data migration is simply the process of moving this data from one system to your new system. This is one of the primary ways that we help provide interoperability. It's by making sure that that data is transferred cleanly and accurately between software systems to the new system you've chosen. We've perfected our process and our custom software through nearly 3 decades of providing these services to a various variety of healthcare providers. No matter what type of provider you are or what system you have, we make sure your data is seamlessly migrated from it to your new systems so that you're able to continue providing quality services to your patients. Why would you want to change software systems anyway? There are many reasons you might be implementing a new system. InfoWorks is your partner no matter what the situation. Our expertise with the widest variety of systems and situations will put to work for you, helping make sure your migration is done correctly. Not to steal from farmers, but we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. Whether you're acquiring a new business, your old software system is sunsetting, or you're just unsatisfied with the products you're currently using, we can help you switch to a new system that will give you everything you need. What are some of the challenges you face when migrating to a new system? Well, first you have to decide what's best for you. That's probably the hardest part. Well, once you've done that, now you have to create a plan to succeed in your data migration. If you fail to plan, then you should plan to fail. And no truer words have ever been spoken than when talking about data migrations. We'll work with you to understand your business, how you currently use your systems, and why you are changing. Our expertise will help you create a plan that will lead to a successful migration and ensure that you are getting what you need out of your new systems. Another huge challenge is making sure you pick the right partners. This isn't only about InfoWorks. You'll have a number of partners involved in your data migration, whether they be hardware providers, other services you use, what software you're going to go to, who to help you with the data migration, and potentially a variety of consultants to help ensure that different aspects of your business are handled correctly. Making a decision on what partners to trust is arguably the most crucial part of an implementation. Download our white paper available in the control panel or on our website for some helpful ideas, including the questions on this slide. While we always hope InfoWorks is the right choice for you, we want to help you make the best choice for your situation. Another huge challenge can be data loss. Put simply, you have a lot of data and a lot of different stored in a variety of ways, and you need to make sure that all of this is brought over correctly and connected together properly so that you can continue using it seamlessly on your new systems. Your data is one of your most valuable assets, and you cannot afford to have anything go wrong. Problems that arise are due to poor planning or execution, can be costly and extremely time-consuming if they're not caught until after you start using your new system. Compatibility issues. Every system is different, every provider is different, every user is different. Everybody uses their systems in a little bit different way. One thing that nearly 3 decades in this business has taught us is that people will come up with creative ways to use their system to get what they need out of it, oftentimes without telling the people who created that software in the first place. I know some of you are chuckling at that line. What we do is we check and work with you to find out what those things are. What's different about your new system from your old system, and where those compatibility issues might come up. We try and address those things before they happen, so that again, when you're done, and you're using your new system and all your data is where you need it. What's the first step to solving these problems? Discovery. As I said earlier, planning. Proper discovery helps you uncover what you don't know and allows you to address it up front. This phase is crucial to the success of any project, and especially any data migration. Our mantra around here is get data now. Until we have our data in our hands, your data in our hands, we can't know what we're up against. Sometimes systems change, so even since the last time we've seen them. Sometimes you use a system differently. Sometimes you have different interfaces that are required and different interactions with other companies that we won't know about until we see them in your data. We get data in our hands as soon as possible so we can start processing it and checking it to uncover any potential issues. We share that data with you as soon as possible so that you can start checking it and let us know about if any of your business needs aren't being met. There's many things that can happen during the process of creating your initial test data, and a lot of those things can be addressed up front. I'd like to introduce Gary Grubert, who's going to take us through some of those. Gary?
Okay, so thank you for that handoff, Jeff. Whoop, we went one slide ahead. All right, there we go. So during the course of a conversion, one thing that we always say, your quality of your data is only as good as the source data that you're initially pulling out of your old system. There is nothing worse than getting 6 months into your conversion process, and then your end users begin going through their testing, and they realize, hey, this is missing, or this isn't right, or this is in the wrong location. A lot of this can be kind of alleviated during the discovery phase, where you can talk through with your end users, your providers, your SMEs, various analysts that are going to be working on the project, from previous lessons learned. Pulling in information from those resources that have done this before can kind of help alleviate some of these needs as you press further down the line. Let's review just a few of these different types of issues, what we call bad data. So one, you could have duplicate data. This could be from duplicate patient files, duplicate medication files, duplicated coverage files, all of the same. So if these come over, this is going to cause some issues over in your target system. And sometimes it may be intentional, but other times it's just that the EHR that you're moving it into just doesn't know how to read some of that other data, and it comes across as duplicated. Another is missing data that was not brought over. So when that comes over into the new system, and maybe your end users are expecting it, maybe they're not, but it's data that may occur during the course of that conversion that just doesn't transfer over as it's supposed to, or just doesn't get moved over at all. Another is inaccurate data. This could be from prior entries in your legacy system that may not have been fully vetted. It could also be information once it's moved over, it's not appearing as it was when it initially started. And it's just the aspect that, one of the necessary evils that occurs during the course of a conversion. It can occur. And the other is incorrect data. Data that you didn't need to pull over, but still pulled over and populated, whether it populated in fields that you wanted it to, populated in fields that you're anticipating something else. So all these types of issues, most of them can be addressed early on, but then just the nature of the beast with a conversion, this bad data is possible to move over during a conversion. I'm going to pass over to David to just provide a little bit more on this.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the things I think is worth explaining to anyone who's watching, the partnership between Dr. First and InfoWorks could really be summed up like this. InfoWorks is about getting the information. They are the pipes. Dr. First brings some AI tools that are here to be able to deal with some of the problems that you're talking about, Gary, to be able to enable data that is duplicate, for example, to be dealt with inside the EHR. A lot of times, the data that is being presented, especially if you're taking 2 or 3 systems and combining them under a new a replacement EHR, a lot of times the issue isn't that you have no way to deal with duplicates. It's that the data isn't clean enough and perfect enough that the EHR actually can appropriately deal with them. So one of the tools that we are providing is a way in which we can provide alignment, enabling that EHR to be able to recognize multiple medications are actually the same medication, but coming from 2 different systems. You talked about missing data. This is another area where our artificial intelligence is able to provide a lot of power, because there's times where there's clinical intent that is implied, but not necessarily said. So as an example, if I was to hand most patients a lisinopril, which is a really common medication that many people are on, and I said, take this daily, they would probably know what I mean. But to an EHR, in order to see that it has the ability to do deduplication, it needs to understand all those components of that particular order. So it may see a medication that has an instruction of take daily different than it would see the same medication with an instruction of take 1 tablet by mouth daily. There's a lot that's implied in many of these examples, and our system is capable of identifying those things and working to resolve them as well.
So moving on to a next challenge that occurs during course of a conversion with med reconciliation is free text and translation errors that can occur during the course of that conversion process. Now, I populated a few different funny slides up here to just kind of show how upon interpretation of a free, that it may not necessarily come out what the intended purpose was. But this really hits home on what happens during a conversion when free text is migrated over into the new system, and it's either translated incorrectly by the new system, or it even occurs as part of a manual translation when a provider is doing a med reconciliation on that old data that comes over. So there could be one example, take 3 days prior. Well, take 3 days prior to what? What is the dose? Maybe the dose didn't come over properly, or there was an inaccurate information from inaccurate data that we mentioned earlier that came over. If a SIG says take once, well, take once when? Take that in the morning, take it in the evening, take it at bedtime. So all these different challenges during a provider when they're doing med reconciliation on a conversion is this free text that originates in the new areas of your new system, and the translation possibilities of an error occurring, which, as anyone knows, if there's a translation error, you have just increased your risk for an adverse drug event. David, anything further on that?
Yeah, I guess really what I'm hearing you say, Gary, is this is not just like a simple mapping exercise. It can't be, because bad data, missing data, it doesn't get any better without that human element under most circumstances. And our AI is also accustomed to being able to deal with this. I'll give you a really simple example that we've seen happen in real life. When our system sees something like that lisinopril, again, the normal way that medication is taken is 1 tablet by mouth every day. But we've seen cases where a doctor might have held down the 1 button for half a second too long. They end up with 11 tablets by mouth once a day. And a simple mapping exercise is just gonna push that bad data right through. Our system is able to identify those things, and we have a working principle inside of our AI that says, listen, no answer from the AI is far better than a wrong answer. And so when the AI sees things like this, and it looks and sees this is not statistically normal for this medication, and on top of that, it doesn't meet the clinical expectations and clinical guardrails our system has. What we do in that case is actually not produce an output. Now, I want to stress in every case we've talked about, wherever AI is doing something, we are always providing the original free text right beside the translated text. In this case, though, where we see something like 11 tablets daily, what we're going to do is just present the original free text. We're not going to present the codified values. And the reason for that is this. I kind of liken it to stairs and an escalator. What we do as people walking up an escalator is, oh, yay, this is faster, easier, better. If the escalator stops working, we all still know what to do with that staircase, right? We still can climb up it. And that's the same principle that you'll find for users who are using our systems. This is one of the reasons where our partnership as Dr. First and InfoWorks is so strong.
Oh, went ahead too far.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Yeah, we're all good. And coming up, and click. All right, there we go. Thank you, David. All right, so any providers, pharmacists on the call, they're going to understand alert fatigue. We've all been through it, you know, but during the course of a conversion, if we talk about any of that bad data come over, the free text, the translation issues, all providers, you know, they kind of discuss, you know, their alert fatigue. And, you know, this is a concern for providers. As you're doing a med reconciliation review on a medication, you know, it is very frustrating that every click you make, another alert pops up, or a BPA appears, or, you know, you get a warning that is inappropriate. You know, and over time, this becomes such a frustration to the providers. You know, unfortunately, at times, you know, they begin to click through because they've just seen so many. And we're only on the first patient, and we've already had 8 different alerts, and we've still got 5 more medications to review. And during the course of that, oh, well, I've already seen that alert twice already. Just click through it. Are the alerts always appropriate? Well, if an alert's appearing, it's appearing for a reason. But when they appear so many times over and over, this is frustrating on the end of the provider. And alert fatigue is, unfortunately, it is real. And it, you know, is there potential that can cause adverse drug event? Absolutely, especially if it did have a meaningful use for what that alert was supposed to be. David.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I feel like the best way I can sum this up is these pop-ups are frustrating just because sometimes they feel like my EMR is being stupid. Like, how is it that this thing could be warning me right now with something that's so clearly okay? The point is that the EMR doesn't understand. The warnings need to be dependable. So what we have to do as people that are migrating data from your old systems to your new systems is to make sure that the EMR does understand the clinical intent. When it's able to interpret the data, and the data is all there in the way that it needs to be for the EHR to be able to consume it, well, then you end up with alerting that actually makes sense. And this is really key to a new system that's being adopted, because the last thing you want to do is invest months of your life into a conversion and then have a user who is, you know, spreading their dissatisfaction. What you hope for is those users that are praising your efforts. And I think this is a key area we find a lot of different conversion processes are going to either succeed or fail on.
All right. So further with med reconciliation issues that occur during a conversion, and this is medication history challenges. So again, we've got the data can moved over. There may be translation errors. There may be more free text, but there's also, now we could be into incorrect data. We could be to inaccurate data. We could be into missing data. And all providers have been through this where they need to click through multiple different screens to be able to find a response to an issue, so they have the medication that came over. Why was this medication being ordered? Well, that's not present. I have to go dig for it and find it. All EHRs try to optimize their system by reducing the number of clicks that a provider needs to utilize in order to get to a particular area or find an answer. And you would hope during the course of a conversion that the information that was present on, nice and beautiful on one screen for that medication order, when it transfers over, all of that information is going to be there. Well, a lot of times it's missing. And that's just another nature of the beast coming over from an old system to a new. The EHR may not necessarily know how to particularly populate that discrete information for the provider to very conveniently review. And what ends up happening, that provider needs to go through screen after screen to go find an answer. What if he needed to find information on a particular SIG because that didn't transfer over properly? What if it's in the wrong location and it's misinterpreted as another aspect of that signature for how the patient is supposed to use it? Provider has to go dig around, find what the appropriate response is. So these are definitely challenges faced every day by our providers, by going through multiple different areas, because as it moved over, the new EHR just doesn't know how to necessarily read what came over from its initial stages.
Yeah, this is one of those things, like, again, going back to why we do what we do, it's very frustrating for users. I've heard the analogy used here where it's like, going to work used to just always mean for all of us, hey, we're going to face traffic. And I think med reconciliation can feel that way to some users. It's like a necessary evil. We know why we have to do it. We subscribe to the process, but boy, it sometimes can be difficult. And this is where Dr. First really aims to bring a lot of aid into the process. Bad data is something that oftentimes is seen to be what is the root cause of the frustration for users. As you said, cases where data is either not there or partially there or not present in the fields you'd expect it to be in. So what's the solution? Well, the solution we found is that AI can definitely come to the rescue. We have been doing this process with customers using Dr. First medication history for many years, and have found that AI can take a majority of the clicks and keystrokes out of the med reconciliation process. And this is huge. Users can definitely feel that.
Okay. And one of the last challenges that we're going to kind of go through is your drug database. Now, this is one of the areas that really isn't under the control of the provider. It's not even really under the control of the builders, your SMEs, people that are going to be reviewing. This is the foundation for your entire system, FDB, Medispan, Centrum. Those drug databases dictates how those medications kind of map and relate to each other within the new system. In a perfect ideal conversion, you're going to be going from the same drug database to the same drug database, and even more ideally, you're going to be going from the same NDC to the same NDC. This is common, especially if it's a particular medication that's only one source. But if you have a merger and acquisition going on, those NDCs may not necessarily map up. And in fact, your drug databases may not necessarily map up. So A does not always correlate with B moving from the one system to the other. Well, what happens when those don't match up? Well, one, information is going to come over as free text because it's not going to be able to be provided in a discrete manner. And as we kind of already discussed with free text opens up to interpretation and manipulation that a provider has to dig for, may not be able to find. Either way, that has to be manually reviewed for that information. Another is you may be missing interaction checking. Is this resulting in some of these extra alerts that you may be receiving, or did just no interaction occur because the new EHR does not necessarily know how to crosswalk over from that old drug database information that came over? And of course, as I mentioned, this information needs to be manually entered. And you can imagine you have a drug such as warfarin, which does have a very low, narrow therapeutic margin in which a dose, just a slight dose change can be adversely, adverse to the patient. And if that comes over and, you might have a multi-complex where it's take 5 milligram tablets Monday, Wednesday, Friday, take 2.5 milligram tablets on Tuesday, Thursday. And that has to be manually reconciled because everything is not in a discrete manner. You can see the potential how there could be harm to a patient just during the course of human error, which, obviously none of that was intentional, but it's still human intervention steps in to try and review some of this information that just wasn't known how to be read by the new system from the old.
The Dr. First is really focused on this problem in particular because, again, we're, going back for years, we've been moving random data from pharmacies to random hospitals, people that have no business relationship with each other, and it's often at a per patient level. So what we're talking about here is a solution that enables us to be able to provide a crosswalk of NDCs that's very dynamic, that isn't because we've worked with all these vendors and we have one big giant answer from all of them. No, it's because we know what's happening out in the wild. And with that knowledge and with the AI that we built on top of it, we're able to crosswalk data, leveraging AI to make that happen in a way that ensures the clinical intent is preserved. This experience that we've been, building for all these years for our medication history solution makes it really something that the data migration aspect is relatively easy, I guess, comparatively speaking for us. So I want to go one step farther. We've been talking a lot about how there's opportunities for data to go from A to B and potentially not be meaningful when it gets there. I want to expand on that just a little bit further because there's a lot of times where folks say, listen, David, haven't you heard about CCDs? Haven't you heard about these standards that are out there that are about moving data? Well, sure, we most definitely have. And I'm going to give just a couple of quick examples here. These are some of the more common methods that we see for moving data around, lots of different kinds. Many people are familiar with the SureScripts network or are connected to an HIE. FHIR is a very hot topic in this day and age. It's important, I guess, to understand that with all of these standards, there is what I'll call kind of the ideal, and then there's what's happening in the real world. The ideal is that each of these standards, they do have discrete ways for data to be moved with discrete intent, clinical intent being conveyed, and shared identifiers on both the receiver and the sender side. But the reality is that there's always clinical exceptions. There's always reasons why it can't fit into that nice, clean box. So as an example, if I have a SIG that says, take 2 tablets on Monday, 3 tablets on Thursday, and half a tablet on Friday, and don't drive your car while you're on this medication, and make sure you take it with milk. It's complicated, right? So putting that into a nice, clean, discrete set of SIG fields is difficult in all these standards. So what that means is that these standards bodies recognize, well, okay, not everything will fit, so we'll make those fields optional. Those nice, discrete fields we love to always see, we'll make those optional because we recognize sometimes they can't always be populated. Well, the reality is that most of the people that are actually working with and coding to these standards have said, oh, optional fields? I don't have time for a lot of optional stuff. I'm going to skip that and just send the free text, which is always mandatory, which is always there because it's always the baseline of understanding. I give this analogy here. I've got data in each of these different health systems, and if someone wanted to consolidate all of my health data, there's going to be some degree of that data that lives in each of these systems. There's some portion of my health record that's probably in all of them. And then there's other parts that overlap with some and not all. And many of you who are going through data conversions are actually dealing with a very similar problem to my own health records. You might have multiple clinics that are in geographically close locations that you're consolidating under a new EHR. And certainly there's going to be cases where there is patient overlap. I want to be clear, what I'm not talking about is an EMPI. What I'm talking about is a system in which the new system has a chance at being able to consolidate this data down, to be able to make it so that we actually do have an aligned record. And that a provider didn't have to go through the workflow of actually doing that manually, because that is, as Gary talked about, so it's pretty labor intensive and opens up a lot of opportunities for clicks and keystroke types of errors, simple errors. So how does this work? Well, we're taking the data from a lot of different sources, and again, your own system could be one of those sources. This is what we've been doing for years. And we're able to turn that into the terminology that is actually relevant for the receiving EHR. And as I mentioned, this is very dynamic. This is AI-based, extremely dynamic. We are doing this to the tune of about 13.5 million transactions every single day. This is a system that has large amounts of scale with medication types of data. And I want to be clear, we don't actually translate 100%, which for most of us, we'd be saying, oh, hold on, I actually want you to convert all my data. You're saying you don't convert it all. Let me explain that. We actually have found that there is a certain amount of this data that has the potential for ambiguity, has the potential for a collision of clinical intent. And what we have found is that about 7% of the transactions, again, as a safety measure, I talked about this earlier, that 11 tablets once a day on lisinopril, we don't translate that. And that is again, intended to be a safety feature, which hopefully is going to enable a clinician to go through the work of doing that manual conversion themselves. So again, I don't aspire to 100%, but this is a huge, meaningful uptick. And you can see the fruit of that. 80% reduction in clicks and keystrokes, about 30 seconds per medication that is being reconciled is what we're hearing from the field. Now, what does this actually look like? This is a mock-up of the Epic EHR. What you would see is the original SIG, which you can actually see down in the lower portion of your screen there, something like OneTab HS, along with a fully completed Smart SIG, which the system uses to interpret when the user's going through med reconciliation. So they're not manually entering in the 1 tablet by mouth nightly. That's already pre-filled in. They just have to hit accept down at the bottom. Now, they still have the same clinical responsibility to validate with the patient when they're doing med reconciliation. Are you still taking that 1 tablet by mouth? You know, because potentially they've talked to their doctor and the doctor said, you know, let's cut that tablet in half. So that aspect of verifying this is still there. But all the clicks and keystrokes that are involved in getting this data to be useful in that new EHR are not. So going back to that 7%, here's a good example here. We've got a Coumadin where we see take 1 tablet on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and half a tablet on the other days. Now, it's not to say that we can't interpret this, but in many EHRs, they don't have a mechanism for leveraging those 4 click boxes to represent this. So in those cases, again, what we're going to present you with is always the original free text SIG. We're able to do this and have been doing this in med history with all of the major EHRs. That includes Epic and Cerner, Allscripts, and Meditech. This is stuff that we have a lot of users using for our medication history product, and we're excited about the potential of working with InfoWorks to bring the power of this to your own data. So what does this look like? I talked about this earlier. InfoWorks is really the plumbing of this equation, and they are there to take that data out of the old systems and enable Dr. First and Dr. First AI to uplift that data, and ultimately InfoWorks provides that into your new system. Jeff, I'm going to turn it back to you, sir.
All right, thank you, Gary and David. A lot of interesting stuff there, and some things that the health systems are all very aware of. Some of these challenges in doing a data migration. As you can see, you know, this process is a lot more than signing a contract with InfoWorks and having us wave our magic wand and all of a sudden your data is transported from your old system to your new system and it's perfect and ready to use. There's a lot that goes into it in between step A and B. And hopefully you've seen some of the ways that we've partnered with Dr. First in order to make that migration be as accurate and as complete as possible. But the next phase of the process is where you really get involved. And so we've set our plan in motion. We've gotten your data. We've worked with Dr. First and your other partners, your drug file provider, any other interfaces, AR partners, whatever inventory, whatever else you have, to make sure that's all set up and that the data is represented properly. And we've loaded that data into your new systems. And now it's time for testing. And what we want to do is work with you and with your provider and with all your partners to make sure that your data looks exactly the way it needs to, so that when you, no matter what it is you go to do in your new system, the data is there, it's ready, and it's exactly what you need. We'll go through as many iterations of test cycles as it takes. We'll pick up new data, we'll process it, we'll work with the partners, we'll load it, we'll get your feedback, we'll find things that need to be changed, we'll find those idiosyncrasies of how you used your system and address them. We'll make sure everything's ready. At some point, the big days come, and it all adds up to this. You have to stop using your old system, start using your new one. And today's that day. Make sure everything is in place to execute on this. Make sure everybody is in place, has the communication channels they need, know the plan, and are ready to execute it. Generally speaking, your data conversion, sorry, didn't mean to advance there. Generally speaking, somebody else is clicking here. Generally speaking, your migration will take place between the time you close one day and the time you open the next day. This makes it possible for you to continue to service your patients without skipping a beat. Who's doing that there? But the next morning is crucial. You're preparing to open your store on new software systems. We highly recommend that you come in a little early. We ask for an hour or two, and we're going to help you prepare for what you're going to do during that time. You're going to have reports ready from your old system. You're going to have the examples that we used during the testing process that represent some of the things that came up, to make sure that you can look at those things in your new system and check that they're correct. You're going to take a couple of patients that you know well and review their profiles or review their medication history or their other records and make sure that they look right. You're going to look at some of yesterday's data, make sure that looks correct. And you're going to check your drug file and your other ancillary files and make sure that they're set up correctly. This is a crucial period that ensures that when you turn your key and open up your door and let patients into your practice, that you're ready to go. Again, it's way easier to fix things before you start using your new system than it is to fix them afterwards. I thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully you've gotten some good knowledge and some things that'll help you through your next data migration. I do want to make an offer that, mention this webinar, and we're happy to give you a couple hours of consulting, help you with that all important planning phase, help you maybe suggest some partners that you can get in place and make sure that you're ready to best achieve your goals with your data migration. We'll run that through the end of the year, and just please reach out to our sales team and they'll be happy to set you up with that. Again, this is applicable to any systems. It doesn't matter whether it be pharmacy or a health system, a medical office, dental, whatever type of provider you are. We could probably help with the planning phase a little bit. We've seen a lot of things out there and we can help you ask ask some of the questions that you may not even know you need to ask. Speaking of questions, we've got about 10 minutes left here, and I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor to see if anybody has any. I believe you should be able to unmute yourself or just raise your hand, and I can see if anybody has any questions out there. I do see one that came in here. Actually, this one's probably for me. On average, how long does it take to complete a data migration? And really, that's a very individual answer. Certainly, we have a number of relatively stock data migrations from between two systems that we've seen before for a single location provider. Those generally fall into the 8-week range, 6 to 8 week range or so, again, kind of depending on what systems are involved and what type of provider you are. Some of the other projects that we work on can take place over months, or, we've even had a couple that have extended into a couple of years. A major EHR migration, whether it be to Epic or Cerner or one of the others, is a long process, and it's something that a lot of people are involved in, and there's a lot of moving parts in. And we're a partner with you through the entire length of that. One of the things and one of our strengths is kind of helping unify those partners and make sure that they're all communicating well, and ultimately getting you, the customer, the provider, what you need out of your migration process. Anybody else? Here's a good one. Does AI completely replace the need for manual human data entry?
Ooh, that's good.
The holy grail, right? Here's the old magic wand. We'd love to be able to just say, boop, your data conversion's done. David, looks like you probably have a good answer for that one.
Yeah, sure. A lot of times that's a misconception that people has. I want to be very clear about what we're saying AI can do. We are not letting, AI is not replacing the process. What it's doing is speeding up. It's accelerating the process. The human element of verifying your data at the point in time which it's going to be used in clinical workflows is still relevant. And when you're talking about whether that's med reconciliation, or we have a lot of different ways in which we apply this technology. It's actually something that we have available in a number of different both real-time ways as well as batch type modes. Moral of the story though is that when we're getting ready to use that data in clinical workflow, whether that's med reconciliation or e-prescribing or whatever, a user should still be looking at this and saying, okay, does that match what I understand of this situation? Does that match what the patient said? And that's because we believe that, especially in those scenarios where, as I said, we don't aspire to 100% conversion. This is something which what we're able to do is make it so much less painful. But it is still going to require the human element. That is, to us, a critical element to ensure that safety happens on all fronts. AI does, I think, prove itself to be very safe in doing these things, more so than just the human errors that happens in all the clicks and keystrokes of trying to do data manipulation manually. But the real changes are going to be if the clinician has done something, in between what the data you got from the legacy system and now as you're seeing that patient in the workflow. So the short answer is no, we do not ever recommend that this works without a human element to it still, but we have reduced that human element to a fraction of what it was without AI.
Excellent, excellent. Got a few others that have come through here. First of all, a thank you went out to Gary. Some questions. In case you're having trouble in the control panel, the chat box and the question and answer boxes can be opened by clicking on the little arrow next to them. Gary, it looks like you reposted these questions. Is that correct? There's a bunch of them here.
No, it's all the same question. I was copy pasting and it just kept pasting.
Oh.
Same question.
Why don't you go ahead and read it?
Okay. Are these Dr. First features and other considerations available whether it's done as XML or HL7?
All right, so we're not particular to the plumbing, although I think our friends here on the InfoWorks side, like we work together to be able to manage different types of formats of data. The way that the AI is applied, just as an example, in the back end of our systems, we're using this on XML, on HL7, on JSON, on a lot of different methods and mechanisms. So we can definitely be very flexible in how that is applied. And I would say that if you're concerned about the data format being like a barrier, well, I'd love to have a conversation with you to determine if that is in fact a hard barrier or not. I would guess it won't be. So I want to put your mind at ease on that.
Yeah, because basically what it sounds like is we're going to be pulling the information out of the old system. We're going to be running through our various internal process codes that gets handed off to Dr. First, who provides the AI run through. We then convert it back to whatever the target system is going to be in that clean version. Does that sound correct to both you and to David and Jeff?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. And there's one other question that came through here, and I'll see if I can read that. Why can't signature and hard copy images be converted along with live data instead of a lot later?
I'll take that one. And really, it's not, the question isn't, can be stated more generally, is why do some types of data or data from some systems take longer to convert than others? Oftentimes you'll have a situation where you're blending multiple types of data. In this case, we're being asked about data and images that really are drastically different from each other. And when it comes to images in particular, oftentimes one of the things that needs to be done is a complete changing of the data, of the way it's stored. Some systems store things in proprietary ways. Some systems use one standard. Some systems use another standard. Data often has to be manipulated. And with some types of data, this just simply takes longer. So what we always try and do is look at the project as a whole and discuss with you what is it that you need when. What are your business needs? Where are your urgencies? What is it you need to satisfy those? And what should the priorities be throughout the entire process? Again, going back to the specific question on the images, oftentimes images are a record keeping type of thing, something that's used in the case of an audit or for going back into old records. That's not as high of a priority as what do I need in my system to service my patient. And so if things come up where yes, we could, for instance, get the data done in 1 month, but it's going to take 2 months to get the images done, you may choose, or we'll work with you. You may choose to say, okay, I want my data as quickly as possible. I want to be live on my new system, and it's okay that I'll wait another month for my images, or something else. I mean, there's a lot of different types of data. Images come into place with all sorts of different providers, whether it be radiology, sleep study. We have a number of different providers we work with that use all sorts of a variety of images. And, some of those things are small and quick and easy. And some of those things are multiple gigabytes per image and tens, if not hundreds of terabytes of data, and transferring those things between the systems and doing any processing that needs to be done on them can just simply take longer. What we try and focus on is making sure that expectations are set properly, communicated properly, and that everybody knows what's going to happen when.
Okay. I do have another question here, and if you don't mind, I think this may be one that I can field. Why why aren't the information gathering sheets that the pharmacy fills out shared with the pharmacy software vendor? Now, if I'm understanding this correctly, this sounds during the course of discovery when a pharmacy system is doing their initial reviews for what they're going to be wanting their new system to look like. There's the information gathering sheets that's done internally with providers, with SMEs, with various other analysts as part of the team. And I don't think it's that more so that it's not able to be shared or that it's wanted to be shared. And this is where I'm going to toot the horn for InfoWorks and also along with Dr. First, is that we are in a very unique position in that we employ and provide to our clients clinical experts in the field. Those that have worked as consultants, have worked as analysts, have been boots on the ground as end users. So normally when this information is disseminated over to the vendors who's going to be doing the conversions, you're working with a lot of technical development folks that may not necessarily understand the full nuances of what those pharmacy information sheets are. And this is where we're in a very unique position in that we can interpret and we can read and we can understand what that information is that we can then disseminate back to our developers, back to our code writers, whether it's Dr. First providing back to their code writers, InfoWorks providing back to ours. We're able to kind of talk the talk, going back and forth with the client to the code writers. So I'm hoping I answered your question. And David or Jeff, if either of you have anything to add on to that, you're welcome.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to add a little something onto that, which is, one of the things that we do pride ourselves on, and that we're, and at the same time, always trying to improve and be cognizant of, is our communication with our customers and with our partners throughout the entire process. And one of the things we've created this year in order to enable that further is we've redeveloped our own internal ERP and project management software. And that now gives us the ability to provide an extensive portal into our software so that you can literally follow along with your own project and see all the updates that are done in real time, and even have the ability to have some of those documents and other things available to you at the touch of a button.
Okay, let's see. Do we have, I'm not seeing any, do you have any other questions that you're seeing on your side, Jeff or David?
A suggestion was made that, when we do have cases where not all data can be provided at the same time, that we look for alternate solutions. And that's something that we do actively try and do. Everybody isn't always receptive to alternate solutions, but we do have things in place that are able to be offered immediately. Again, going back to the specific example of images, we have we have archive software that's our own, that's has the ability to archive any type of healthcare data and give you access to it via cloud-based software. And that product stores images as well. So whereas taking images and manipulating them so that they can specifically be put into your new system, that might be a time-consuming process. But we may be able to take those same images and load them into our archive software and give you access to them through there on the same schedule as the rest of your data. So that is one thing we do try and remember to offer when we do come up with those situations. And generally speaking, we're always looking for creative ways to give our customers what they need when they need it. I believe that's all I see. Any further questions? I know we've gone a little bit over the hour here. So if there is nothing else, I will just thank everybody for joining us again, and thank my co-hosts, Gary and David, for all the great work today. And look forward to discussing your projects with you and helping you out with them going forward in the future. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.